Cheers. Don't you fall. Don't you fall. I know I put you in a precarious position, but none of that today. None of that for mama. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to my channel. My name is Anna. I talk about books here and we have a lot of fun. Today is a video that I have been kind of neglecting doing. I'm not entirely sure why. When I first came into the booktube sphere, a lot of the ways that I would find people was I would just type in my favorite books and then just look into this person's collection and see if their opinions of what a good book is aligns with mine, and that's how I would find who I wanted to watch. For some reason I've never done it on my channel, not entirely sure why, but here's the day. How exciting. Let's have a lot of fun together and go over the books that I think are the bomb. I tried to veer away from nostalgic favorites. I could pick a million books that I had great memories tied to. For this particular list, I'm going off of books that I know I could pick up and enjoy the story the second, third, fifth, 10th, 20th time around. And that is what is a favorite to me. So, broken it down into 5 categories. I have nonfiction, memoir, play, fiction, and classics. So those are what we're going to be working with. It's about 15 books. I didn't even mean it. It just happened to be that number. Sit back. Get your coffee. And let's make this thing happen. All right, so I listed off the categories wrong. So the first category that we're actually going to start with is memoirs. I love memoirs. I love looking into people's windows, and if people are willing to write their life story and put it out into publication, I'm going to read it. First book that I have is a book that I read this year that, oh my God, it's one of the hardest books I've ever read, one of the most important, one of the most startling, and one of the most brilliant that I've ever read. It is Cockroaches by Scholastic Mukasanga. This book is about the Rwandan genocide. Mukasanga's own family went through the genocide. Unfortunately, she lost a lot of family members, but she did have surviving family members as well, and she takes her own account of growing up in Rwanda and pairs it back to her surviving family members' stories. I suggest this to a lot of friends. I'll never give away my copy because I don't want it to get lost. I will probably reread this next winter. This is something that just is a standout for me as far as memoirs go. Just, oh my God, great, 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 great book. Baby, so good. Jesus. Difficult though, really difficult. Okay, going on the floor. Not as a testament, I know that looks like I don't care about my books, but I'm really just on a pillar right now. I am situated high up in this chair. The second memoir, I guess you could say, is a book that I just finished re-listening to. Again, it's what I talk about when I talk about running by Haruki Murakami. I know that people have conflicted opinions about Murakami, but I enjoy his books. I always have a great reading experience when I'm invested into one of his books. I saw a comment the other day on a video and it said, I think you'll never enjoy Murakami as much as the first time that you ever read him, which I agree with. I think that his books all kind of revolve around the same structure of introduction to the characters and introduction to the story, but there's something about the way that he writes that's just so alluring to me, at least. And this isn't exactly a memoir, I would say, but what I talk about when I talk about running is just a book that motivates the hell out of me. I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that this guy has run over 30 marathons probably at this point. He gave up smoking 60 cigarettes a day, and he decided to just randomly become a writer, and now he's one of the most prolific writers in the world. This is great. Also incredibly brief, so comprehensible. There's nothing pretentious about it, and I think it just takes such a stance on encouraging the average person to do what they think is the unbelievable. I love this book. I'll constantly revisit it. I don't care how cheesy it is. I love it. There you go. There you go. Okay, going into kind of average person doing the unbelievable memoir, we have Theft by Finding by David Sedaris. This is arguably one of the most life-changing books for me. I picked this up at a thrift store, I want to say for $1. I looked at the size and I was like, ew. as a big boy, but I think I read this in, I would say a day. If you're unfamiliar with David Sedaris, he is a humorist, he is a diarist, he is someone who totally chronicles the hilarity in life, and in such a precise, biting way. This is a compilation of his diary entries from 1977 to 2002. 1977, I want to say he was like 21. So you just see the entirety of his ascension into something great, but you get to see all of the muddled and difficult times along the way. And it's just so funny. It's so funny. It takes place in a variety of places. So you have from the South to New York to Europe. It's so good, so brief. I mean, you look at it, you think you can build a house with this brick, whatever that is. Hopefully it's not an embarrassing purchase. So good. Love, love, love. Will reread this. Absolutely. And the fourth book, this is something that I don't think anyone would probably care about besides me, but it is a book that I loved. And it's Art, Sex, Music by Cozy Fanny Tutti. Now, Cozy Fanny Tutti, if you're unfamiliar, I honestly was relatively unfamiliar with who she was. She was a part of the band Throbbing Gristle. Kids Turn Away. That is a kind of one of the pioneering electronic industrial sounds of 1970s. She was a kind of party girl, fun girl who ended up making this incredibly amazing career in music and art and just this underground scene. Oleg found this book for me on the side of the road. I've since given it to friends. It's fine. They can stay there. It's okay. I just loved the way that Tutti wrote her story and just a look into this world that I'm fascinated by. I think it's a great art novel if you're interested in art and interested in industrial or electronic music as well, because I think that it was an undiscovered sound, and I loved it. I love that book. Not for everyone, but something that I have to talk about if I'm going to be talking about my favorites. So this is a very personal journey. I'm being very vulnerable right now. Please enjoy. After that, I have my non-fiction category. If you know me, if you've watched this channel, if you haven't, hello. I love nonfiction. It's very hard for me to narrow it down. I love to read about things that are real. I love to pretend that I'm living those lifestyles. But for this particular favorites, I had to break it down into two of my absolute favorite nonfiction books. These ones are unparalleled and they're very easy to engage with. The first one, Classic Krakauer by Jon Krakauer. I absolutely love Jon Krakauer. Big fan over here. Bing, 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 bing. Classic Krakauer is an easy introduction into his work. It's all of his articles, like his most popular articles, I would say, or at least handpicked, I think, by him. It goes into a lot of the outdoor world, a lot of surfers. There's a great article that he writes about the troubled teen industry, which I think he was kind of blowing the lid off of that way before it has become much more talked about in recent years. Rock climbing, I mean, if you're into any sort of outdoor adventure or if you're interested in getting into that, I highly suggest these stories. So easy and just, again, made for the every person to pick up and just be like, wow, you know, maybe I do want to go on a hike, or maybe I am into whitewater rafting. I'm not, I never will be, but I can still read about it and enjoy it. So, great book, highly suggest. I love my experience with Krakauer, and this is my favorite book of his. The second book that I have in nonfiction, and for the longest time I would tell people that this was my favorite book. My hands down favorite book, can't argue with me, Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. This is, okay, I'm cheating a little bit. This is a little bit of a nostalgic favorite as well. I listened to this book as an audiobook as a kid. Not only did it kind of help me explore this true crime category, but it got me into historical reading, which is something that I don't think is so enticing to a lot of people. I think that this showed me that you can learn about history and it can be told in this graphic and almost fictionalized version. You can still get the same amount of information and be totally engaged from beginning to end. This book follows the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and also at the same time there's a parallel story running with H.H. Holmes is his name, a serial killer in Chicago, just ravaging Chicago and its female inhabitants. So good, so just perfect. I've read it 3 times. It's been my most reread book. I just can't not put this on there because every time I revisit it, I'm like, damn, Eric, Mr. Lawson, you did it again. You did it again. So, my foot's asleep. Ow. The third category that I have is classics. Gotta love them. There's one that I have in fiction that I think might be considered a classic, but I'm just talking about like OG, stamp of classic approval. We'll start with the most recent one that I read, 100 Years of Solitude. This was a journey to get through. It's a journey of a story. It's a journey of a family. It's about the most journey-laden book that you can read, but this was fantastic. Fantasy, familial dynamic, war, has everything that a classic should have, right? It's thick, it's difficult to break into, but once you're into that world, it's hard to get out. I really, really enjoyed this book. Would love to revisit this again. The second classique that I have is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I'd read Steinbeck before. He didn't really blow my socks off, but with East of Eden, he absolutely did. Again, family saga, war, fighting for finances, a devil inhabited in a character. Oh God, it's so good. I loved this. Again, there's a lot of things that didn't age particularly well in this, but I think the overall format and the dissection of this story is so, oh God, good. Mommy loves you. And then after that, the third classic that I have is Animal Farm by George Orwell. Great. I loved this so much. You're on the edge of your seat for the entirety of this ride, and you don't know why, because in the back of your head, you know exactly what's going to happen. And I think that that is what is so amazing about this book, is we're kind of primed to imagine that it's so unbelievable that this could be happening. But our gut instinct is telling us that we know exactly what is going to happen. If that makes sense. Love this book. Highly suggest, and I think it's one of the easiest classics to get into. After that, I have my play category. I only have one play in this. It was hard to narrow it down because I do have quite a few plays that I enjoy, but this is one of the plays that I always think about and I would love to perform. I've never performed this one, but I've read it a number of times and I enjoy it wholeheartedly. And that is Red Light Winter by Adam Rapp. This was given to me by a dear friend of mine. This is just a story about two guy friends who go to Amsterdam. One of them ends up kind of quasi falling in love with this prostitute that he meets. It sounds like a Hollywood story, but it's anything from that. You kind of follow them as their lives reconvene for a couple of years, and it's just a story about lust and longing and loneliness and kind of facing the consequences of our actions, and it's so good. I love that. And now, my friends, we are into the fiction, which is maybe the most hotly anticipated category of them all. These are books that I will reread a million times over, and I know that they're gonna do it for me. They're gonna do it. The first book I'm gonna list off top of my head is The Pisces by Melissa Broder. I love this book. I hee hee ha ha, LOL, LMAO, LMFAO. It's a hilarious, modern, dating woman story. Talked about it a million times. I'm sure if you literally click on any video of mine, you will see me mention it. Love this book. Think it's hilarious. Can't get enough of it. The answer is yes. Yes, yes, yes. The second book is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Again, have talked about this quite a decent amount of times now. I love this book. It's going into all of my interests. Murder, academia, fascinated by those highbrow academics, imposter syndrome, you know, feeling like you don't belong, and Bennington, Vermont, which is right around where I'm from. So again, kind of a nostalgic read, but also a fantastic read and widely acclaimed, so I feel like I'm not the only person who agrees with that. Love this book. Again, people have talked about this a million times, but I'm hotly into it. Hotly into it, baby. Then I've chosen The Beach by Alex Garland. I'm really not hugely into the thriller category, but this one just did it for me. I love this book. I want to reread this book. Anytime that I see it in a thrift store, I want to pick it up and just dive right back into this wild ride of a story. This is about these backpackers, these English backpackers who end up running into this crazed man in their hostel, and he tells them about this elusive and hidden island in Thailand, and so they make the trek there, and crazy things happen. Great. Love that thriller. And then I have The Idiot. Sue me, okay? I read this when I was going to Ukraine last year. I was traveling. Celine was traveling, the main character. We were paired together in this diversified experience. It was great. I loved it. You're going on a summer trip when you read this book. I think it's all, no matter what your age is, you can relate to the confusion of being in a different country. Also being unsettled in a college town. It doesn't even have to pertain exactly to college, but just being in these unsettled situations. So good. I love this book. Definitely anticipating reading either or. I don't know when that's gonna be, but I'm sure it will happen at some point. Mama's just gotta pick up the book. And last, guys, coffee isn't cold yet, which is surprising. The last book that I love, and truly the book that got me really back into reading, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. This was the book that I toyed with throwing it into classics or just throwing it into general fiction, but I don't know. I'm sure it's reached classic status, definitely, but for me this is just so timeless and so pertinent to so many different things. This book did to me exactly what I need reading to do to me. It opened up my world and it shifted my way of thinking about reading. This is about a gentleman who is admitted into a psychiatric ward, and it's about the infrastructure of that ward and how it works and how people are kind of kept down, and it's so good. It's just classic storytelling, I would say. That being said, guys, those are my favorites. You've seen a little glimpse into who I am, into who you could be. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making this. I don't know why I didn't make it sooner, but that's me. This is also subject to change. Maybe next year I'll do an updated version, but these are my all-time favorites at the moment. I think they're probably going to stay with me for a little bit. So you guys are wonderful. You're fabulous. Have an amazing day, and thank you so much for being here.